The cameras were rolling, the audience buzzed with anticipation, and the moderator was about to close the segment. But Denzel Washington didn't flinch. He leaned forward, eyes narrowed, voice steady, almost too steady for what he was about to say. "This country has a right to know who's pulling the strings behind closed doors," he said, pointing directly toward Donald Trump, who sat 3 chairs away, arms crossed, smirking like he always did when cornered. "And sometimes, the strings aren't just political. They're personal. Deeply personal." The room fell into a hush. Even the cameraman froze, unsure if this was scripted or an eruption about to change everything. Trump's grin faltered for the first time. "What the hell are you insinuating?" he shot back, his voice low but edged with panic. Denzel didn't blink. "You speak of family values, of American greatness, of transparency, yet for over 2 decades, you've kept a truth hidden so deep, even your loyal base wouldn't believe it if it came from anyone else but you." He slid a sealed envelope across the table. "This contains the birth certificate, the DNA test, the sealed school records, the mother's sworn affidavit." Trump's hand twitched but didn't move. He stared at the envelope as if it might explode. The audience gasped audibly. The moderators didn't dare interrupt. It was no longer a panel, it was an ambush, an exposure, a moment broadcast in real time to millions. "Are you saying I have a child no one knows about?" Trump barked, voice louder now, almost cracking. Denzel nodded, calm and unshaken. "You don't just have a secret. You have a son. And he's 24 years old. And he's been hidden." "Why?" Silence swept the room. The crowd no longer buzzed, it was paralyzed. Then Trump reached forward, and pushed the envelope away. The envelope slid to the edge of the polished table, untouched. Trump's fingers, usually so animated, stayed clenched on the armrests. For once, he wasn't controlling the room, Denzel was. "I don't know what stunt you think this is," Trump snapped, his voice sharp and brittle. "But if you think I'll stand here while you slander me with tabloid garbage." "It's not tabloid," Denzel interrupted firmly. "This is history. And history doesn't ask for permission." Gasps rippled through the studio again. The moderators, previously background noise, leaned forward, their notes forgotten. "Who is he?" someone in the audience whispered. Denzel took a breath. He didn't need to raise his voice, his calm cut sharper than any shout. "His name is Marcus Kane. Born in 2001, New Jersey. His mother worked in your real estate company. She was 19. You paid her off, kept her silent, and buried every trail she left behind." Trump's face flushed, jaw tightening. "There's no proof." "There's more than proof," Denzel replied, tapping the envelope. "There's testimony. From Marcus himself. He's agreed to come forward, today." A stunned silence fell. Trump looked like he'd seen a ghost. "He's here?" The side door to the stage opened. And from the shadows stepped a tall young man, broad shoulders, dark blonde hair, a jawline unmistakably Trump. But it wasn't the features that caught the crowd off guard. It was the fire in his eyes. He wasn't confused. He wasn't ashamed. He was ready. The crowd gasped in unison. Trump didn't move. His eyes locked onto the young man. "Don't you dare." "I already did," Marcus said, his voice clear, unwavering. "I spent 24 years in your shadow. But I'm done hiding." Denzel stood, his body language still calm, but his presence now towering. "You've built towers across this country, Mr. Trump," he said. "But this one truth? You couldn't bury." The crowd erupted, not in applause, but in disbelief. The truth was no longer sealed in an envelope. It was standing center stage. Trump's eyes didn't blink. He stared at Marcus like he was staring at a fracture in his empire, one that no amount of concrete or cash could seal shut. His lips parted, but the words didn't follow. For once, the former president, known for never losing control of the mic, had nothing. The audience held its breath as Marcus stepped fully into the light. He wore no suit, no tie. Just a navy shirt and quiet defiance. "I don't need your name," he said. "But I won't be erased by it." Denzel sat back down, not because he was finished, but because he had handed the floor to the only voice that mattered now. "I've seen your life on television," Marcus continued, turning directly to Trump. "I've watched you preach family values, stand next to your children like trophies. And I sat in a cheap apartment wondering if I even deserved to exist." Trump finally spoke, quiet, but edged. "You don't know the full story." "No," Marcus snapped, louder now. "You made sure I never could." A wave of stunned murmurs surged through the studio. One of the moderators leaned in, voice shaking. "Mr. Kane, Marcus, why now?" "Because I'm tired of watching this man sell strength while hiding weakness. He didn't just deny me, he denied the truth. And I'm not here for revenge. I'm here to remind America that even kings fall, especially when they forget they're human." Denzel's eyes never left Marcus. His body leaned forward again, voice low but commanding. "It takes guts to stand alone. But it takes even more to stand in front of the man who erased you, and say, 'You don't get to write my story anymore.'" Trump stood suddenly, the chair sliding back hard. "This is a setup. You think this changes anything?" "No," Marcus said, stepping closer. "I think it reveals everything." The studio was dead silent again. You could hear the whirring of the cameras. The quiet shudder of a nation watching. Marcus turned to the crowd, then back to Trump. "You made your fortune silencing people. But this time, the silence speaks louder." And for the first time in the broadcast, Trump looked. Trump's fists were clenched so tightly his knuckles had turned white. His jaw worked furiously, chewing on 100 comebacks that just wouldn't land. The crowd stared, unblinking. Even the moderators, normally keen to shift tension, seemed frozen in the realization that history was unfolding before them. "You know what this is?" Trump barked finally, voice cracking with strain. "This is a political ambush. You all think if you tear me down personally, I'll fall publicly." Denzel raised one eyebrow, unmoved. "We didn't tear you down. The truth did." Trump turned toward Marcus with a sneer. "You want to be famous, huh? Use my name, paint yourself a victim, cry on cue? It's pathetic." Marcus didn't flinch. He took a step forward, voice low but steady. "I didn't ask for your name. I asked for honesty. For acknowledgement. You're not a stranger because you had to be. You're a stranger because you chose to be." The crowd stirred again, this time a slow, painful recognition in their faces. Some looked at Trump with doubt. Others, with disappointment. "You cut my mother out of your life," Marcus continued. "You cut me out before I could even speak. And you still stand there like the victim?" Trump tried to laugh, but it came out hollow. "You're ungrateful. You should be thanking me." "For what?" Marcus fired back. "For a childhood spent watching you lie on television? For knowing I'd never be allowed to sit with your other children? For learning the value of truth the hard way, because I never heard it from you?" Denzel's voice cut through the moment again. "You built an empire on image. But this," he gestured to Marcus, "this is what happens when the image cracks. What we see now, is real." Trump looked around, scanning the crowd, searching for any familiar nods of support. But the room was stone. Even his usual loyalists sat stiffly, unsure of how to react. Then Marcus delivered the blow no one expected. "I don't need your love," he said. "I just needed to stop pretending I never existed." The air shifted. This wasn't politics anymore. This wasn't campaign spin or televised drama. This was a father being held accountable, by the son he never thought would stand tall. The silence that followed Marcus's final words wasn't empty, it was weighted. Heavy, alive with 1,000 unspoken reactions from the crowd, the crew, the millions watching at home. It wasn't just a personal revelation anymore. It had become a cultural moment. Trump adjusted his jacket like it was armor, but even the crisp lapels couldn't hide the bruises truth had just landed. "You want sympathy? Go cry to your mother," he muttered, not looking Marcus in the eye. But Denzel leaned in before Marcus could speak. His voice wasn't angry, it was grave. You don't get to deflect, Mr. Trump. Not here. Not now. You stood in front of this country for years preaching about family, morality, leadership. And I still do, Trump snapped. No, Denzel cut in. You preached about control. About power. But this young man? He motioned toward Marcus. He's proof that even the most powerful can't outrun consequences forever. Trump scoffed. Consequences? What consequences? He's alive, isn't he? Living his life. I don't owe anyone an explanation for my private past. Denzel's expression hardened. Private pasts don't excuse public lies. Marcus spoke again, this time, his voice more personal. I didn't come here to destroy you, I came here to stop hiding. Because every time I turned on the TV and saw you, I felt invisible, and I won't carry that anymore. The crowd stirred again, but differently now. Not just shock. Something deeper, empathy. People weren't watching a scandal, they were witnessing liberation. You want to be remembered as a builder, Marcus said to Trump. But what you tried to destroy speaks louder. Trump's face twisted. You think the public cares about this? They've forgiven worse. They don't want drama, they want strength. Denzel stood slowly. Then maybe you've forgotten what real strength looks like. It's not in headlines or handshakes or buildings with your name on them. It's in owning your mistakes, facing them. And right now, you're running scared from the one thing you can't fire, sue, or spin away, your own blood. Trump stared back, but now, there was something unfamiliar in his eyes, doubt. Because for the first time, the truth was no longer in his control. Trump took a step back, not physically, but emotionally. The sharp retorts he was known for, the bravado that once filled arenas, all felt strangely hollow under the studio lights. For a man who had spent decades mastering the media, this moment had flipped the script on him entirely. He glanced at the cameras, aware that millions were watching, judging, absorbing every word. But unlike before, he wasn't holding the remote control. He was the subject of a confrontation that refused to be edited, spun, or redirected. Marcus didn't move, he didn't need to. His presence alone made the truth undeniable. You want the world to believe you're untouchable, he said calmly. But you can't keep building walls around your lies and calling it legacy. Trump let out a bitter laugh. I've fought off Congress, the media, foreign leaders. You think I'm going to fall because of a teary confession? Denzel's gaze locked onto him. This isn't about tears. It's about time. And yours is running out, not in years, but in relevance. Because the people who used to cheer your name are starting to see the cracks. A murmur rolled through the audience. Some nodded slowly. Others whispered. Marcus stepped forward, narrowing the gap. I'm not here to be your enemy, he said. But I also won't let you rewrite me out of the story you never had the courage to own. Trump clenched his jaw. I never asked for you. And I never needed your permission to exist, Marcus replied, unshaken. But I refuse to be your secret any longer. You didn't protect me, you protected yourself. Denzel turned to the camera now, his voice slow, measured, but thunderous in impact. America, this isn't a tabloid headline. This is what happens when the truth stops knocking, and kicks down the door. The studio lights felt hotter now. The walls seemed tighter. Even Trump, usually defiant, looked unsure. And then Marcus delivered the quietest line of the night, and somehow, it struck the hardest. I'm not asking to be loved, I'm asking to be seen. The words hung in the air, heavier than any accusation. It was no longer just a confrontation. It was a reckoning. Trump's expression shifted. For the first time, something cracked through the polished arrogance, a flicker of recognition, maybe even guilt. It was gone in an instant, buried beneath years of learned deflection. But it had surfaced, and Marcus saw it. The audience remained breathless, unsure whether they were witnessing justice or collapse. The moderators barely moved. No one dared interrupt the electricity in the air. "I know who you are to the world," Marcus said. "Businessman. President. Icon. But I also know who you weren't, to me. You weren't there at my first school play. You didn't sign a single birthday card. You weren't even a name I could say out loud without shame." Trump inhaled sharply. "You don't know what I gave up. What I sacrificed." "Don't turn this into martyrdom," Denzel interjected coldly. "You didn't give anything up. You made a choice. And that choice left a child in silence." Trump pointed at Denzel, the rage simmering again. "You're manipulating this. You don't know what it's like to have your life ripped apart by lies." "I do," Denzel said, his tone turning razor sharp. "I've lived through the headlines, the misquotes. But what I never did, was deny my responsibility to another human being. Especially not my own flesh and blood." Marcus didn't blink. "I spent years thinking I was the problem. That something about me wasn't worth showing the world. But now I understand, it wasn't me. It was your fear." Trump shook his head slowly. "You were a mistake," he muttered. The room recoiled. Some gasped. Others winced. Even the moderators couldn't hide their shock. Denzel leaned forward, voice low. "You just said more about yourself than any scandal ever could." But Marcus didn't look crushed. He looked calm. Resolved. "I may have been a mistake to you," he said, "but I am not one to myself. I built a life without your name, your money, or your approval. I found strength in absence. And now, I'm finding freedom in truth." He turned to the audience, then back to Trump. "I was never a scandal. I was a son." And in that moment, it wasn't Trump who held the power on stage. It was the young man who refused to be invisible anymore. The moment was no longer just personal, it had become political, cultural, historical. This wasn't a man confronting his estranged father. This was a nation watching the cracks in a carefully curated myth widen before their eyes. Trump's silence wasn't strength anymore, it was retreat. His bravado, once his armor, now felt like noise that couldn't drown out the one thing he feared, truth with a microphone. Denzel stepped forward again, gaze locked on Trump. "You built towers with your name on them," he said. "But what good are towers if they're hollow? What good is legacy if it hides from its own blood?" Trump scoffed, trying to gather what little posture he had left. "I've done more for this country than most people ever will. I don't owe anyone a thing." "That's where you're wrong," Marcus cut in. "Legacy isn't what you say about yourself, it's what others live through because of your actions. And right now, your legacy is a shadow I had to crawl out of." He turned toward the audience again. "I'm not just here as his son. I'm here as someone who refuses to let silence write my story. You all know what his name stands for. But now, you know what it tried to bury." The crowd erupted, not in applause, but in that deep, murmuring sound of recognition. The kind of noise people make when something finally makes sense. When the curtain lifts. Trump, flushed and fuming, tried one more swing. "You think the people care about your sob story? They want strength. I gave them strength." "No," Denzel said, walking closer. "You gave them fear. You gave them spectacle. But strength?" He pointed to Marcus. "That's what strength looks like. Telling the truth when it costs you everything. Standing in front of the man who denied you and saying, 'You don't define me.' That's strength." Trump's lips curled. "You're just actors playing heroes." Denzel didn't blink. Sometimes it takes an actor to expose the script of a coward. The room fell dead silent. And then Marcus delivered the line that would be replayed for decades to come. "I didn't come here to ruin you. I came to free myself from you." In that moment, the lights weren't on Trump anymore. They belonged to the man who was no longer a secret. And the man who had always been silent, but never weak. Trump paced now, his face reddened not from stage lights, but from something he hadn't felt in years, cornered. The applause he was used to, the control he commanded, none of it arrived. In its place stood two men he couldn't manipulate, one who shared his blood, and one who spoke without fear. "You don't get it," Trump snapped, voice rising. "You think this moment means anything? I've survived everything, impeachments, lawsuits, smear campaigns. This is noise." Denzel tilted his head, calm. "No. This is clarity. And clarity isn't noise, it's what remains when the noise is gone." Marcus took a breath. "I didn't come here hoping for a hug. I didn't expect remorse. But I needed the world to know that the man behind the name abandoned me. Not because he had to, but because I didn't fit the story he wanted to sell." Trump laughed bitterly. "I gave you a legacy whether you wanted it or not. That name, you'll use it to open doors." Marcus stepped forward. "A name opens doors. But truth walks through them." Gasps echoed. The studio had become a courtroom of public opinion, and Trump was losing ground by the second. "Let's talk legacy," Denzel said, his voice sharper now. "You think legacy is branding. It's not. Legacy is impact. And you've left more scars than blueprints." Trump narrowed his eyes. "You don't know what it's like to build an empire." "I do," Denzel replied. "But I build mine on honesty, not omission." The moderator finally spoke, but even her voice was cautious. "Mr. Trump, would you like to respond to your son directly?" Trump stared at Marcus for a long beat. Not as a politician. Not as a performer. But as a man facing something he couldn't buy or threaten away. "I made choices," Trump finally muttered. "Choices I don't have to explain." Marcus didn't break eye contact. "No. But I do. Because your silence never protected me. It just protected your image." The weight of the words settled like dust after an explosion, quiet, heavy, irreversible. Denzel stood between them, not as an actor, but as a witness. The truth doesn't need permission. It just needs courage. The silence was now sacred. Even Trump didn't speak. The weight of what had been said, what had been exposed, what had finally been named, it all hung in the air like smoke after a fire. No one applauded. No one cheered. They just watched, waiting to see who would break first. But it wasn't about breaking anymore. It was about becoming. Marcus stepped forward one last time. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't cry. His tone was level, but it vibrated with finality. "I grew up without your face at my games. Without your voice on the phone. Without your name spoken with pride. But I made it. Not because of you, but despite you." Trump opened his mouth. Closed it. The man who never ran out of words finally had nothing left to say. Denzel turned to Marcus. "You don't owe this moment anything more. You spoke. And the world heard you." Marcus nodded. "I didn't do it for headlines. I did it for every kid who's been erased. Every son or daughter who's been told they were better kept hidden. Today, I stepped out of that shadow." He looked Trump in the eye. "You can keep the brand. I'll keep my truth." Trump looked older now, not just in years, but in presence. Like the weight of unspoken things had finally caught up to him. There was no villainous outburst. No final strike. Just silence. Denzel faced the crowd, then the camera. This wasn't just a reveal. It was a reckoning. Because when lies wear suits and sit in palaces, it takes courage to walk in with nothing but truth. The moderator, clearly shaken, leaned into her mic. "That concludes tonight's segment. Thank you for watching." But Denzel raised his hand gently. "One more sentence. To every person watching," he said, "remember this, a name might hide you. Silence might bury you. But truth? Truth always knows how to rise. The lights dimmed. The show ended. But the conversation had just begun. Some stories aren't born for applause, they're born to unbury the truth. Denzel didn't just expose a secret, he exposed the silence. And Marcus? He didn't ask to be a trump. He chose to be seen. If this story struck you, don't scroll in silence. Drop a comment. Share the truth. And remember, some names open doors. But only truth walks through them.